bike shop owners, bike shop employees. They're trying to explain what is going on with the bike shop industry and the bike industry in general. And I think they're somewhat off the mark, or they're not covering everything. So I think what I will start with is, why did I start this bike shop? I started this bike shop in 2017 after working in shops for like 5-6 years before that. And the problems in 2017 that made me want to run this type of bike shop where I'm not dependent on bike sales is, one, the margins. When I started working in shops, the margins on a bike were almost 50% margins. So if a bike shop bought a bike for $1,100, they'd be able to sell that bike for $2,000. Okay, so almost keystone markup on the margins. And every year I worked in a bike shop, the pro deals got smaller, the wholesale got smaller when I was ordering in product. Every year it seemed like it just went down a percentage point or two. And at that point, the margins on bikes were like 30-35%. And I'm like, this is not sustainable to keep your overhead. So the margins were deteriorating. And also, I was working at a Specialized shop in 2014, 2015. And right about that time, the Specialized mountain bike full suspension patent called the FSR design, it was running out of the patent that year. So the next year, there was going to be tons of bikes with that suspension design on there. It had been 20 years since the patent. You get 20 years to capitalize on your idea, and then it's open to the marketplace. And we were doing some sales training, and I was talking to the Specialized rep, and I just asked him, I was like, what's the plan for when the FSR becomes out of patent? And he just looked at me like I asked the wrong question. I'm not a good employee. I probably did ask the wrong question. But I also saw DW Link, VPP, so all the good suspension designs were going out of patent soon. And that meant before 2016, you could not buy a good bike, a good full suspension bike off the internet. There was one like direct-to-consumer website, one main one. It was called Bikes Direct. I think they're still around. And their full suspension designs were complete garbage. So the patent on the design for the suspension to work properly, you couldn't just order from China a nice full suspension bike and sell it in the US. There's patent laws. So those patent laws were going out, and I was like, okay, so once these patent laws come out, people are going to be able to buy a good bike online for cheaper. So I was concerned about that, and right about then, 2017, YT popped up, and they basically, it's a Specialized 4-bar FSR suspension out of patent, and those bikes rip, they do great. And yeah, so the direct-to-consumers sales were off to the races at that point. So I'm talking about pre-COVID issues now. So you've got lower margins, you've got competing online sales coming in, and that was before COVID. And just those two made me think, I don't want to try to sell bikes, I just want to fix bikes. COVID happens. What happened with COVID? First thing, the price of property almost doubled in my area and doubled in a lot of areas. So if you're running a business in a rental, if you're renting a strip mall, or you own the property your bike shop sits on, instead of it being worth $500,000, it's worth $1 million. So that changes the game. That changes the game for the person who has to rent. That person who owns the property has to basically double your rent for the foreseeable future. Next time it's up for lease or renewal, your rent's getting doubled. If you own that property, you got to make a decision. So before, you had a $500,000 property or whatever, and you're running a bike shop out of it, and the bike shop's making $100,000 a year or whatever. Now that retail space you own is now worth $1 million. Okay, so what's the better decision? To keep that retail space for $1 million and run a bike shop out of it that isn't even making money the last few years? Or is the wise decision to sell off that bike shop, sell off that property, take that $1 million, put it into the bank, put it into a CD investment, and get 6% back every year with no worry whatsoever that you're going to lose your money? So the price of doing business has gone up. So you have to justify basically justify making double the money, because your expenses, even if you own your store, that money you have in your store could be better spent elsewhere right now. So a lot of bike shops, you're like, well, why are they closing? Why is this huge brand closing? Why is this distributor closing? That kind of has to do with it. It's the money. Where is the money best well spent? Where is your money best invested? So that's the big issue with COVID, property values. Second issue with COVID is the tariffs and the inflation. So you used to be able to buy a really good bike for like $2,000, a really good full suspension bike for $2,000. And if you wanted to save money, you could buy a direct-to-consumer full suspension bike for like $1,400. Okay? Saving that $600 isn't as big of a deal when the bikes don't cost as much. But now, with inflation, you've got to spend at least $3,000 to get a good bike. And then you got at least to spend $3,000 to get a good bike. But then you can go online and buy one for $2,100 instead of $3,000. You can buy one closer to what you would have paid for pre-COVID at a bike shop. So the higher the prices go with inflation and tariffs, the harder it is for someone to convince themselves to go into a bike shop and pay the 30% markup, where the 30% markup wasn't as hard for a consumer to do. All right, so you've got all those issues. You've got out of patent, great suspension. You've got your retail space is worth twice as much. Are you going to keep fixing bikes for $50,000 a year, or are you going to sell your $1 million storefront and make what's 6% of $1 million? $60,000? Are you going to make $60,000 just with it sitting in the bank? Are you going to be able to convince a consumer not to buy online at 21 and go to you for $3,000 for the exact same parts on the bike, just a different name on the sticker? So it's a hard sell for bike shops. It's a hard sell for distributors. You've got, I'm simplisting it, but you got Alibaba, you've got stuff coming in straight from China at not a retail markup, straight to the consumer. So you have all these issues. People want bike shops to stay in business. I want bike shops to stay in business. But for me, I was 27. I didn't have money to waste on something I didn't really know was gonna work out. And I looked at opening up a storefront in 2017 after I did the mobile bike shop for a year. And it was I just didn't see how I could make it work. Seems like to make it work, you either have to be huge or be tiny. And this is going to get into my second rant. What is the industry going to do in response to the pressures? First option is, and that's the option I think is the best that I took, you scale down to one-man, two-man operation or two-person operation. You get a tiny storefront, you focus on service. Luckily, if you work hard, you can make about $40 an hour once all your expenses are paid. If you work hard, you can make a decent amount of money, not a lot. I'm never going to be able to grow this business. But I mean, I make enough that I can buy my bikes, I can go on a vacation or two a year. So you can scale down, keep your expenses super low. Go into the worst side of town, open up a bike shop where it's super cheap. Scale down. You could focus on e-bike stuff. If you want to risk your shop getting burned down, if you're renting it, I mean, who cares? What else is the bike industry doing? Another way to go about it is you can run more of a non-profit, used type, communal bike shop. And I think that should be picking up. Sell used bikes, operate as a non-profit, bring in new bikes when they're asked for, try to get people to volunteer to fix bikes, keep it super low cost. Maybe everyone there is just it's a passion project. Everyone's there just working part-time to have a community. Because with all these bike shops closing, I worry about the community around cycling getting destroyed. And I feel like co-op, used type bike communities like the Bicycle Collective could fill in the gap there. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing the industry try to do is go the third route, which I am very frustrated with and I'm really disappointed with. And that's the route of conspicuous consumption. So the bikes have gotten good. Everything's out of patent, you know? So how do you convince someone to spend more money at a bike shop versus just buying something online? I kind of think it's a little, now we're getting into the manipulations point, because when I was young, when I was 20, 21, I would spend over half my paycheck on a new bike. I had to have the new Ibis Mojo SL. I had to have the new Ibis Ripley. And I really felt like I had to have it because every bike that came out was so much better than the bikes that were out the year before. You got through axles, you got better disc brakes, you got better suspension. Everything every year was getting better. So it was easy for me to shell out that money because I want to have the best ride possible. And after COVID, around 2019, I ride the new bikes, I ride the 2019 year bikes. There's really not an improvement. And if there is an improvement, you're getting seconds on if you go on an hour bike ride, if I bought the fanciest, nicest $10,000 bike from Yeti or whatever, I might get 30 seconds faster on an hour-long bike ride. The advantages are just not there to spend the money. So I'm seeing like Specialized, they dropped a $22,000 e-bike with a special paint job and all this fancy stuff. And when I saw that in the news release, I'm like, this is like, they're marketing bikes like companies market Rolexes and designer handbags. If you want the best bike possible, it's probably not a Specialized Levo. If you want to signify to everyone while you drive around in your car and you have a $22,000 bike on the back of your car, I call it the Rolex-fication of the bike industry. So you can't beat them on quality, you can't beat them on price. Okay, let's market this so we can beat the direct-to-consumers on prestige. And what does me owning this bike signify to the world? I can't stand it. I like to ride bikes because I like riding bikes. A bike is a tool. You know, a watch, is a watch a status symbol or was a watch to tell what time it was? If all you care about is telling time, go buy a Timex. If you want to feel like you're rich and you want to symbolize to everyone who you are, how much money you make, you go buy a Rolex. So I feel like this sounds bad, but a lot of bike shops, the way they are going to stay in business is by signifying that they are the Rolexes. They are selling the Rolex. They are selling the bike that will make you look like you've succeeded in life. You've got the Specialized Levo, the special edition paint. It's $22,000. It was all over. You've got the SRAM transmission, limited edition, 1985 or 1987 colorway. It's even printed on the chain. None of this is about riding a bike, you know. If it was about riding a bike, you'd just go buy a good bike. You'd spend $5,000 on it, $3,000, you'd be done. So I'm making this video because I explain what's going on with the bike industry, but more importantly, I'm a little annoyed with the route the bike industry is making. Enough complaining, I gotta get working. I gotta climb the roof. I'm climbing my roof. Look here, I gotta fix this. Storm's coming in, and my fan is broken. Check that out. I don't know, did I run over something? See that? Gotta fix my fan here. Well, I'm on my roof trying to fix this broken fan. I don't have any idea what I'm doing up here. So, yeah, bike industry, every week someone's going out of business, and I thought it might be worth explaining why versus just saying COVID ruined the bike industry because there's so many bikes. Yeah, there's a lot of bikes. I don't think that's the really reason everything's closing down, is the over inventory from 4 years ago. That's happened plenty of times. No, the reason they're closing is investments. It's not a wise investment to put into the bike industry. Your money in the bike industry is not as wise as just investing it in a regular bank. That's the main issue we're seeing. So, hey, everyone have a good day.